Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Deep. Joel Byers had spent 15 years perfecting the art of silence. Not just the operational silence required aboard the USS Leviathan, where even a dropped wrench could mean the difference between invisibility and detection, but the deeper silence of a man who had learned that words were weapons best kept sheathed until the moment demanded their edge. At 38, Joel commanded respect through presence rather than volume. His crew called him Ice behind his back, not out of disrespect, but recognition of his unnerving calm under pressure. During the Iranian crisis 2 years prior, when hostile submarines had stalked them through the Strait of Hormuz, Joel had methodically outmaneuvered 3 enemy vessels while his captain slept, never once raising his voice above a whisper. The Leviathan was home in ways his house in Virginia Beach had never been. Here, 200 feet beneath the Pacific surface, every system had a purpose, every man had a role, and betrayal was impossible. The ocean itself would punish disloyalty with swift, merciless death. Joel's personal quarters were Spartan. A narrow bunk, a desk barely large enough for his charts, and a single photograph. The picture showed his wife Candy and their 16-year-old daughter Miranda at last year's Navy Christmas party. Candy's smile seemed forced even then, her auburn hair perfectly styled, green eyes focused somewhere beyond the camera. Miranda, however, beamed with genuine pride, wearing Joel's old Navy pin on her dress. Daddy's little sailor. He'd called her since she was 5. Miranda was the one person who could crack Joel's legendary composure, the only soul he'd ever loved without reservation or strategy. His marriage to Candy had been different, calculated from the start. They'd met during shore leave in San Diego 7 years ago. She was beautiful, charming, and ambitious, working as a real estate agent with dreams of bigger things. Joel recognized her type. Someone who viewed marriage as advancement, not partnership. But she was also magnetic, the kind of woman who turned heads and sparked envy. For a man who spent months underwater, having such a wife waiting ashore felt like a trophy earned. Their courtship was brief, professional almost. Candy admired his rank and potential for promotion. Joel appreciated her social skills and the way she managed their household during his long deployments. Love, if it existed, was convenient rather than consuming. Miranda changed everything. From a moment Joel held his newborn daughter, he understood what people meant when they spoke of unconditional love. She became his anchor to the surface world, the reason he counted days until shore leave, the face that appeared in his mind during the longest, darkest patrols. Now, 3 weeks into their current deployment, Joel was reviewing sonar patterns when Communications Officer Preston Nolan approached with unusual hesitation. "Sir," Preston's voice carried an odd tension. "Priority communication for you. Personal emergency." Joel's blood temperature dropped 2 degrees. His physical response to potential crisis developed through years of submarine service. He followed Preston to the communications bay, noting how the younger officer avoided eye contact. The encrypted line crackled as Joel accepted the handset. "This is Lieutenant Commander Byers." "Joel." Candy's voice, but wrong somehow. Higher pitched, almost breathless. "Thank God. You need to know, Miranda's in the hospital. Critical condition." The words hit like depth charges, distant but devastating. "What happened?" "Accident at home. Head trauma." "Joel, it's bad. Really bad." "The doctors." Her voice broke, but underneath the sobbing, Joel detected something his trained ear couldn't quite identify. Captain Stuart Barr materialized beside him, having monitored the emergency channel. "Son, we're in contested waters. Can't surface for 3 days minimum." "I understand, sir." Joel's voice remained steady even as his world tilted. "Candy, I need details." "How did it happen?" The line carried ambient hospital sounds, monitors beeping, distant conversations. Then Candy's voice again, but not directed at the phone. "Thank God, his coward dad isn't here to complicate things." Joel's grip on the handset tightened. The words were clearly audible, meant for someone else in the room. Before he could respond, a new voice joined the call. "Sir, this is Dr. Elias Davidson. Your daughter was found unconscious with severe head trauma. We're monitoring for brain swelling, but the next 48 hours are critical." "Found? Where's she found?" Background noise shifted, and Joel heard a third voice, official professional. "The neighbor saw someone leaving your house around the time we estimate the incident occurred." The line went dead. Joel stood motionless for 30 seconds, processing data like the submarine's tactical computer. Candy's strange tone, her comment about him being a coward dad, the mention of someone leaving the house, the timing. Preston watched nervously as Joel handed back the handset. "Sir, orders. Maintain current heading and depth." Joel's voice carried the same calm authority he used during combat drills. "Continue mission parameters." But inside, beneath the professional mask, something fundamental had shifted. Joel Byers had spent 15 years learning that the ocean punished deception and disloyalty without mercy or forgiveness. Now, it seemed the surface world required similar lessons. As he returned to his quarters, Joel began calculating. Not torpedo trajectories or sonar triangulations, but something far more personal and infinitely more dangerous. If his family was in crisis, he would respond with the same methodical precision he brought to underwater warfare. The photograph on his desk showed Miranda's trusting smile. Whatever had happened to his daughter, whoever was responsible, they had made a critical error in judgment. They had threatened Joel Byers' anchor to the world above. Chapter 2. Surface Tension. 72 hours passed like depth charges in slow motion. Joel maintained his duties with mechanical precision, but every spare moment was spent in his quarters, staring at Miranda's photograph and replaying that phone call. The more he analyzed Candy's words and tone, the more discrepancies emerged. Preston Nolan entered without knocking, a privilege Joel had granted only to the communications officer during emergencies. "Sir, another call. Your wife again." Joel followed him back to communications, noting how the crew parted slightly as he passed. Word had spread about Miranda's condition, and submarine crews were like small towns. Everyone knew everyone's business. "Candy." Joel's voice remained controlled. "Joel, thank God. Miranda's stable, but still unconscious. The doctors say." Her voice carried the same strange breathiness as before. "Look, there's something else. Stanley Pearson from your old unit called. Said he wanted to help during this difficult time." Joel's blood turned arctic. Stanley Pearson, a man he'd served with 5 years ago, before Joel's promotion and transfer. Pearson had been cashiered from the Navy for conduct unbecoming, specifically for attempting to seduce officers' wives during deployments. The fact that Candy even knew Stanley's name sent alarm signals through Joel's tactical mind. "I don't remember giving you Stanley's contact information. He found me through social media. Wanted to offer support." Another pause, then Candy's voice again, not directed at the phone. "Don't worry, he's still underwater for 2 more days." This time, Joel was certain. Candy thought the line was muted or disconnected. She was speaking to someone else, someone she was reassuring about his location and availability. "Candy, who's with you?" "What?" "Oh, just hospital staff." "Joel, I need to go. The doctor wants to run more tests." "Wait, I want to speak with Dr. Davidson again." "He's not available. I'll call tomorrow." The line went dead again, but this time Joel was ready. He'd been recording the conversation on his personal device, a habit developed during intelligence briefings. Preston lingered nearby, clearly wanting to offer comfort, but uncertain how to approach his notoriously self-contained superior officer. "Preston, I need a favor. Personal, not operational." "Of course, sir. Contact your brother, the one who works for Virginia Beach PD. I need information about an incident report filed 3 days ago. My address." Discreetly, Preston nodded, understanding the gravity. Joel's brother Marcus was a detective with connections throughout the Virginia Beach law enforcement community. 6 hours later, Preston returned with a printout that made Joel's suspicions crystallize into cold certainty. The incident report was sparse but revealing. Miranda Byers, age 16, found unconscious in her bedroom by her mother. Head trauma consistent with a fall downstairs. "Mother, Candace Byers, stated she'd been at work during the incident. No witnesses, no signs of forced entry. But the neighbor's statement, buried in the supplemental reports, told a different story. Mrs. Jennifer Ball, age 67, reported seeing a man leave the Byers residence approximately 30 minutes before the ambulance arrived. Description: Caucasian male, approximately 40 years old, medium build, driving a blue pickup truck. Joel cross-referenced the description with his mental files on Stanley Pearson. The age, build, and vehicle type matched perfectly. Sir, Preston waited for orders. Send a message to your brother. I need everything he can find on Stanley Pearson. Current address, vehicle registration, employment history. Everything. Sir, we're still 2 days from port. I know exactly how long we have. Joel's voice carried a new edge, something Preston had never heard before. And I need that time of plan. Alone in his quarters, Joel spread his charts across the desk. Not navigational charts, but floor plans of his house that he drew from memory. He marked sight lines, entry points, and the exact location where Miranda would have been found. The stairs from Miranda's second-floor bedroom to the main level had a landing halfway down. If someone had pushed her, the trajectory would be wrong for the injuries described. But if someone had struck her in her room and then arranged her body at the base of the stairs. Joel's analytical mind processed the scenario with the same clinical detachment he used for combat assessments. Miranda had discovered something. Either Candy and Stanley in a compromising position or evidence of their relationship. Stanley had panicked, struck her harder than intended, and they'd staged the scene to look like an accident. The comment about him being a coward dad now made perfect sense. Candy was reassuring Stanley that Joel wouldn't complicate their cover story because he was trapped underwater, unable to investigate or interfere. They had made 2 critical errors. First, they'd underestimated Joel's ability to gather intelligence from beneath the ocean. Second, they'd hurt Miranda. Joel opened his laptop and began typing. Not official Navy communications, but personal messages to contacts accumulated over 15 years of military service. Men who owed him favors. Men who shared his code about family and loyalty. Men who understood that some debts could only be paid in blood. By the time the Leviathan surfaced in San Diego, Joel would have assets in place. Surveillance on Candy and Stanley. Financial records. Employment histories. Personal weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The ocean had taught Joel patience, precision, and the value of overwhelming force applied at exactly the right moment. In 48 hours, Stanley Pearson and Candace Byers would discover that betraying Joel's daughter was the last mistake they would ever make. As he worked, Joel felt the familiar calm descend, the same state of focused clarity that had made him legendary among submarine crews. This was just another tactical problem requiring surgical solutions. Miranda's photograph watched from the desk as her father planned war. Chapter 3, Depth Analysis. The Leviathan broke surface under a gray San Diego dawn, water cascading from her hull like tears from a steel whale. Joel stood on the conning tower, breathing his first surface air in 3 weeks, tasting salt and freedom and the metallic edge of impending violence. His encrypted phone buzzed with messages accumulated during their ascent. 3 were from Candy, each more frantic than the last. 2 were from Marcus Nolan, Preston's detective brother. The final message came from a number Joel recognized, Garrett McDonald, his former master chief, now running private security in Virginia Beach. Garrett's message was characteristically brief. Package delivered. Sugar confirmed. All hands ready. Sugar. Mint surveillance was in place. Joel's network was operational. Preston approached with final communication logs. Sir, your brother-in-law called the boat directly. Says Miranda woke up yesterday, but isn't speaking yet. Doctors are cautiously optimistic. Relief flooded through Joel's chest, the first genuine emotion he'd allowed himself in 3 days. Miranda was alive, conscious, probably going to recover fully. But the fact that she wasn't speaking suggested trauma beyond physical injury. She'd seen something, remembered something. Joel's phone rang. Candy, calling right on schedule. Joel, thank God you're back on surface. When will you be home? Flying out tonight. How's Miranda? Better. She's awake now. and the doctors think she'll make a full recovery. It's such a relief. Candy's voice carried genuine emotion for the first time since this began. Maternal instinct, perhaps, or fear that her daughter might remember inconvenient details. I want to speak with her. She's still pretty out of it. Maybe when you get home. Candy. Joel's voice dropped to the register his crew knew meant absolute authority. Put my daughter on the phone. Now. A pause, then rustling sounds. Miranda's voice came through, weak but unmistakably hers. Daddy. The single word nearly shattered Joel's composure. Hey, little sailor. How are you feeling? Tired. My head hurts. A pause. Daddy, something happened. I know, sweetheart. We'll talk when I get home. Okay? Just rest. Mom says I fell down the stairs, but Miranda's voice faded as the phone was clearly taken away. She's exhausted, Candy said back on the line. The medication makes her confused. Doctor says memory issues are normal with head trauma. But Joel had heard what he needed. Miranda's tone carried the same uncertainty as his sonar operators when they detected something that didn't match their instruments. She knew the official story was wrong. I'll be home tomorrow morning, Joel said. Don't let anyone else visit until I arrive. Of course. Joel, I'm so sorry this happened while you were away. I feel terrible that I wasn't home to prevent it. Joel disconnected without responding. Candy's performance was improving, but she was still an amateur playing against a professional. The flight to Norfolk Naval Base gave Joel 8 hours to review the intelligence Garrett had compiled. Stanley Pearson, 42, dishonorably discharged from the Navy, currently unemployed, but living beyond his apparent means in a rented house 3 miles from Joel's residence. Vehicle registration confirmed. Blue Chevrolet pickup, license plate matching the neighbor's partial description. More interesting was the timeline Garrett had reconstructed through security cameras and cell phone towers. Stanley's phone had pinged towers near Joel's house 17 times in the past month, always during Joel's deployment. The pattern suggested regular visits, not chance encounters. But the most damning evidence was photographic. Garrett's surveillance team had captured images of Stanley leaving Joel's house the morning of Miranda's accident, approximately 25 minutes before Candy called 911. His expression was clearly visible: panic, guilt, and fear. Joel studied the photograph as his plane descended toward Norfolk. Stanley Pearson looked exactly like what he was, a man who had just made a catastrophic mistake and was desperately hoping to escape consequences. He was about to learn that Joel Byers never left consequences to chance. Garrett met Joel at the airport, a mountain of a man with scarred hands and eyes that had seen too much combat to retain illusions about human nature. Situations worse than we thought, Garrett said without preamble as they walked to his car. Your wife's been careful, but not careful enough. Financial records show she's been paying Stanley's rent for 3 months. Credit card receipts put them together at hotels during your deployments. How long? Best guess. 6 months minimum. Maybe longer. Joel absorbed this information like tactical data. The betrayal was extensive, well-established, and apparently confident enough that they'd grown careless. That overconfidence would be their downfall. What's your assessment of Miranda's situation? Garrett's expression darkened. She walked in on them. Had a half. Stanley panicked, hit her harder than he intended. Then they staged the fall. If your daughter hadn't survived, but she did. Joel's voice carried the finality of a torpedo lock. And she's going to remember everything. As they drove toward Virginia Beach, Joel outlined his plan. It was comprehensive, merciless, and completely legal, at least on the surface. Joel had learned from the best submarine commanders that the most effective attacks were the ones the enemy never saw coming. By the time Candy and Stanley realized they were under assault, it would be far too late to mount any defense. Joel Byers was coming home, and he was bringing the full weight of 15 years of military training, tactical expertise, and carefully cultivated ruthlessness. The war was about to begin. Chapter 4. Home Invasion. Joel's house looked exactly as he'd left it 3 weeks ago. Colonial revival architecture, manicured lawn, the kind of suburban perfection that concealed more secrets than it revealed. But now he saw it through tactical eyes. Sight lines, entry points, defensive positions. His home had become a battlefield. Candy's BMW sat in the driveway beside a vehicle Joel didn't recognize. A silver Honda with temporary tags. Rental car, probably for Stanley, suggesting they were being more careful about his truck being spotted. Joel parked across the street and spent 10 minutes observing. Through the living room window, he could see movement, two figures in what appeared to be intense conversation. Candy gesturing emphatically, a man's silhouette responding with defensive body language. They were arguing about something, probably about Joel's imminent arrival and how to handle Miranda's potential memories. Garrett's voice crackled through Joel's earpiece. Overwatch confirms one adult male inside. Matches Pearson's description. 2 vehicles in the garage. Back exit is clear, front door only approach. Joel had positioned Garrett and 2 other former military contractors in observation points around the neighborhood. Not for violence, not yet, but for intelligence and insurance. Everything that happened from this moment would be documented, recorded, and preserved for later use. Joel approached his own front door like an insertion operation, silent, purposeful, with every sense alert for changes in the environment. His key turned soundlessly in the lock, a skill developed during surprise inspections aboard submarines. The conversation inside stopped the moment he stepped into the foyer. "Joel." Candy's voice carried manufactured surprise. "You're early." Flight was ahead of schedule. Joel's voice remained neutral as he assessed the scene. Stanley Pearson stood near the living room window, nervous energy radiating from his posture. He was exactly as Joel remembered. Average height, soft around the middle, the kind of man who relied on charm because he lacked substance. "Stanley." Joel's acknowledgement was clinical. "Unexpected to see you here. I wanted to offer support during this difficult time." Stanley's voice carried forced casualness. "Candy and I served together at the base social events. We're friends." Joel noted the carefully neutral language. No admission of personal relationship, no indication of intimacy. They'd rehearsed this encounter. How thoughtful. "Where's Miranda?" "Resting upstairs," Candy said quickly. "Doctor's orders. She shouldn't be disturbed." "I'll be gentle." Joel moved toward the stairs with the steady pace of a man accustomed to command. Neither Candy nor Stanley attempted to stop him. Too obvious, too revealing of their desperation to control access to Miranda. Miranda's room was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. She lay in her bed, awake but staring at the ceiling with the unfocused gaze of someone still processing trauma. "Hey, little sailor." Joel's voice softened as he sat beside her bed. Miranda turned toward him, and Joel saw intelligence behind the exhaustion. His daughter was thinking, remembering, trying to piece together fragments of a shattered experience. "Daddy." Her voice was stronger than it had been on the phone. "I'm glad you're home." "Me too. How are you feeling?" "Better." "But..." Miranda glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. "Mom says I fell down the stairs, but I remember being in my room. I remember arguing voices downstairs, then coming down to see what was wrong." Joel kept his expression neutral while his tactical mind processed this information. "What do you remember about coming downstairs?" "Mom and a man were in the living room. They were close. Too close. I said something, and the man got angry. He grabbed my arm, and I tried to pull away." Miranda's voice faltered. That's when everything went black. Every detail confirmed Joel's tactical assessment. Miranda had surprised them. Stanley had panicked and struck her. Then they'd moved her to the base of the stairs to support their cover story. "Miranda, this is important. Do you remember the man's face?" "I think so. He had dark hair, kind of chubby. I'd seen him before. He came by when you were deployed." Miranda's eyes sharpened with sudden clarity. "Daddy, Mom lied about what happened, didn't she?" Joel felt the last vestige of doubt evaporate. His 16-year-old daughter had provided eyewitness testimony that would destroy Candy and Stanley's deception completely. "Yes, she did. But we're going to fix that." Joel squeezed Miranda's hand. "I need you to rest now. But tomorrow, we're going to have some important conversations with some people who will want to hear exactly what you remember." "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. You're the victim here, and you're also the hero. You're going to help make sure the right people face consequences for what they did." Joel kissed Miranda's forehead and returned downstairs, where Candy and Stanley waited with transparent anxiety. "How is she?" Candy asked. "Recovering well. Her memory seems to be coming back." Joel watched both their faces carefully. Stanley's complexion went pale. Candy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's good," Stanley said. "Head trauma can be tricky. Sometimes people remember things that didn't actually happen." Joel smiled, the same expression he wore when enemy submarines revealed their positions. "Miranda's always been very observant. Accurate, too. She takes after her father that way." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Joel was letting them know that their deception was blown, their cover story compromised, and their time was running out. "Well," Stanley said, moving toward the door with obvious haste, "I should let you family have some time together. Candy, call if you need anything." Joel watched through the window as Stanley departed, noting that he drove the silver Honda rather than his registered pickup truck. Still being careful, still hoping to avoid detection. But it was far too late for caution. "I'm exhausted," Candy announced. "I think I'll take a bath and turn in early." "Good idea." Joel's voice remained pleasant. "Tomorrow's going to be a very busy day." As Candy retreated upstairs, Joel activated his encrypted phone and sent a single message to Garrett. "Operation approved. Execute Phase 2. The war had officially begun. Chapter 5, Intelligence Gathering. Joel rose at 0500 hours, a habit ingrained by 15 years of military discipline. He moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision while Candy slept. Coffee, shower, review of overnight intelligence reports from Garrett's team. The surveillance had been productive. Stanley Pearson had spent the previous evening at his rental house, making numerous phone calls and consuming significant quantities of alcohol. His behavior suggested a man under extreme stress, making increasingly desperate decisions. More importantly, Garrett's technical specialist had successfully installed monitoring devices in both Stanley's house and his vehicles during the night. Every conversation, every phone call, every movement would now be recorded and analyzed. Joel's secure laptop displayed a real-time feed from Stanley's kitchen, where the man was currently pacing while speaking on his phone to someone identified as Bernice, Stanley's sister in Richmond. "I'm telling you, this whole thing is falling apart," Stanley's voice came through clearly. "The husband's back, and the kid is remembering things. Kenny thinks we can ride it out, but I'm not so sure." Joel increased the volume as Bernice's voice responded. "Stanley, you need to get out of there. This was stupid from the beginning. Messing around with a Navy officer's wife? What were you thinking? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The girl wasn't supposed to get hurt. But she did get hurt, and now you're looking at assault charges if she talks. Maybe attempted murder if they decide it wasn't an accident." Joel saved the recording and immediately forwarded it to Marcus Nolan, Preston's detective brother. This conversation alone would provide probable cause for arrest warrants, but Joel wanted more than arrests. He wanted total destruction. Upstairs, Candy was stirring. Joel heard the shower running, her daily routine beginning. He had perhaps 30 minutes before she came downstairs, 30 minutes to review his daughter's testimony with a clear, objective mind. Miranda appeared in the kitchen at 0630, moving carefully but independently. The head trauma was healing faster than expected. Another indication that the injuries had been inflicted by an amateur who'd panicked rather than someone with genuine intent to cause permanent harm. "How do you feel about talking to some police officers today?" Joel asked as he poured orange juice for both of them. Nervous, but ready. Miranda's voice carried determination that made Joel proud. "I want to tell the truth about what happened. The truth is all we need." Candy emerged 20 minutes later, dressed for success in a sharp business suit and carrying her real estate portfolio. Maintaining normalcy, keeping up appearances. "I have 3 showings today," she announced. "Miranda, stay home and rest. Joel, maybe you could take some leave to help with her recovery?" "Already arranged. I'll be staying close to home for the foreseeable future." Something in Joel's tone made Candy pause, her real estate smile faltering slightly. She was beginning to sense that the dynamics had shifted, that her control over the situation was slipping. That's good," Families should stick together during difficult times. After Candy left, Joel made 2 phone calls. The first was to Detective Elias Davidson, not the doctor from the hospital, but Marcus Nolan's partner in the Virginia Beach Police Department's Special Victims Unit. Davidson specialized in domestic violence and family assault cases, with a particular expertise in situations involving staged accidents. The second call was to Lieutenant Roberto Marks, Joel's former executive officer and current JAG Corps attorney. Roberto had left active duty to practice civilian law, but maintained his security clearance and his connections within the military justice system. Both men agreed to meet at Joel's house that afternoon to interview Miranda and review the evidence Garrett had compiled. Joel spent the morning with his daughter, helping her prepare for the interview while simultaneously gathering additional intelligence on Stanley's background. The picture that emerged was of a man with a pattern of predatory behavior toward military wives, financial problems, and a history of violence when confronted with consequences for his actions. At 1,400 hours, Detective Davidson and Attorney Marks arrived simultaneously, followed by Garrett's unmarked surveillance van. Joel's living room transformed into a command center, with recording equipment, legal documents, and tactical communications. Miranda's interview was devastating for Candy and Stanley's defense. She described the scene in clinical detail. Her mother embracing a man she recognized from previous visits, her confrontation with him, Stanley's violent response, and her certainty that the fall down the stairs was staged after she'd lost consciousness. This is textbook assault with intent to cover up adultery, Davidson concluded. Combined with the surveillance evidence and phone recordings, we have multiple felony charges. What's the timeline for arrests? Joel asked. I can have warrants by tomorrow morning, but I want to coordinate with the district attorney's office to ensure we're maximizing charges. This isn't just assault. It's conspiracy, false reporting, insurance fraud if they file claims, and potentially attempted murder if we can prove intent. Roberto reviewed the legal implications while Garrett provided additional surveillance footage. The case was solid, overwhelming, completely devastating for both defendants. But Joel wasn't satisfied with legal justice alone. I need them to understand the full scope of their mistake, Joel said quietly. Prison sentences are just the beginning. Davidson and Roberto exchanged glances, recognizing the tone of a man who had calculated beyond conventional justice. Joel, Roberto said carefully, whatever you're planning, make sure it stays within legal boundaries. These people aren't worth compromising your career or freedom. Joel's smile was arctic. Everything I'm planning is completely legal, but that doesn't mean it will be merciful. As the meeting concluded, Joel activated his next phase, financial warfare. By evening, both Candy and Stanley would discover that their credit had been destroyed, their employment terminated, and their assets frozen pending criminal investigation. The submarine had surfaced, and Joel Byers was bringing the full weight of his network to bear against the people who had dared to hurt his daughter. Chapter 6. Battle Stations. The arrest occurred at dawn, synchronized with military precision. Detective Davidson took Stanley at his rental house, while a separate unit arrested Candy at her real estate office. Joel observed both operations from Garrett's mobile command center, watching as his wife and her lover learned that their world had collapsed overnight. Stanley offered no resistance, seeming almost relieved that the charade was finally over. Candy fought like a cornered animal, demanding lawyers, claiming innocence, insisting that this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved through rational conversation. Neither understood that rational conversation had ended the moment they decided to hurt Miranda. Joel's phone buzzed with a call from Roberto Marks. Both suspects are in custody. Stanley's already talking. Apparently, he wants to make a deal. Candy's demanding a high-end criminal attorney and claiming she's the victim of a vindictive husband. What's Stanley offering? Full confession to the assault in exchange for reduced charges. He's claiming it was accidental, that he never intended to hurt Miranda seriously. Says Candy pressured him into staging the fall to avoid investigation. Joel processed this information tactically. Stanley was attempting to save himself by sacrificing Candy. Predictable behavior from a man who'd already demonstrated cowardice and poor judgment. What about Candy's position? denying everything. Claims Stanley was just a friend offering support, that Miranda's memory is compromised by head trauma, that you're orchestrating this because you want custody in a divorce. Interesting strategy, considering the surveillance evidence. Her attorney seems confident they can create reasonable doubt. Rich suburban housewife versus dishonorably discharged ex-Navy with a history of violence. Jury sympathy could favor her if they can discredit Stanley's testimony. Joel's smile was predatory. Candy's legal strategy revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the battlefield. She was fighting a conventional war, while Joel had already deployed unconventional weapons. Roberto, what's the maximum possible sentence if both are convicted on all charges? Stanley's looking at 8 to 12 years. Candy could get 5 to 8, possibly more if we can prove conspiracy and premeditation. Not enough. Joel, that's substantial prison time. Prison is temporary. What I have planned is permanent. Joel disconnected and activated Phase 3 of his operation. Over the next 6 hours, a carefully orchestrated campaign would destroy both Stanley and Candy's ability to rebuild their lives after incarceration. First, social media warfare. Garrett's cyber specialist unleashed a coordinated release of evidence across multiple platforms. Security footage of Stanley leaving Joel's house. Audio recordings of his confession to his sister. Financial records showing Candy's payments to Stanley. Medical records documenting Miranda's injuries. Within hours, the story had gone viral. Navy wife's affair leads to daughter's assault. Local news stations picked up the story, followed by regional outlets, then national coverage. Candy's real estate company immediately terminated her employment to avoid association with the scandal. Stanley's few remaining friends and family members began publicly distancing themselves. Second, financial destruction. Joel's military contacts included specialists in economic warfare, men who understood how to dismantle someone's financial life without leaving fingerprints. Candy discovered that her credit cards had been canceled, her bank accounts frozen pending investigation, and her professional licenses suspended. Stanley found himself evicted from his rental house and unable to secure employment due to his rapidly expanding criminal record. Third, social isolation. Joel had maintained relationships with the wives of other military officers throughout his career, women who understood the unique challenges of deployment marriages and the absolute importance of family loyalty. A whisper campaign began, spreading through military communities across the country. Candy Byers had betrayed her husband's trust and endangered her own daughter for the sake of an affair. The social consequences were devastating. Military communities were small, interconnected networks where reputation was everything. Candy would never again be welcome at base functions, military social events, or anywhere that Navy families gathered. But Joel's masterstroke was psychological warfare, targeting their deepest fears and insecurities. For Stanley, Joel arranged for certain information to reach other inmates at the county jail, specifically that Stanley had assaulted a teenage girl. In prison hierarchies, crimes against children occupied the lowest rung. Stanley would spend his incarceration in protective custody, isolated and terrorized by the knowledge that every other inmate considered him legitimate prey. For Candy, Joel's campaign was more subtle but equally devastating. He systematically contacted every client she'd worked with over the past 2 years, every professional association she belonged to, every social connection she'd cultivated. The message was consistent. Candy Byers was a woman who betrayed trust, who chose personal gratification over family loyalty, who couldn't be relied upon in any capacity. By evening, both Stanley and Candy had learned that their arrests were merely the beginning of their punishment. The legal system would confine them temporarily, but Joel's retribution would follow them for the rest of their lives. Miranda watched the news coverage from her bedroom, still recovering, but alert enough to understand that her father was systematically destroying the people who had hurt her. "Daddy," she asked when Joel came to check on her, "is this really necessary? They're already going to prison." Joel sat beside her bed, his expression softening for the only person who could still reach his humanity. "Sweetheart, some people understand mercy. Others only understand overwhelming force. Your mother and Stanley made a choice when they decided to hurt you. Now, they get to live with the consequences of that choice forever. Will we be okay? We'll be better than okay. We'll be free of people who don't deserve our trust or loyalty. As Miranda drifted off to sleep, Joel returned to his command center. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of his operation, the psychological breaking point that would ensure Stanley Pearson and Candy Byers never again posed a threat to anyone Joel cared about. The submarine commander had surfaced completely, and his enemies were about to discover that Joel Byers' capacity for strategic patience was matched only by his capacity for absolute, merciless revenge. Chapter 7. Full Assault. Joel stood in the courthouse corridor, watching through reinforced glass as Stanley Pearson shuffled toward the defendant's table in chains and orange jumpsuit. 3 days in county jail had transformed Stanley from nervous confidence to barely contained terror. His face carried the pallor of a man who discovered that his fellow inmates considered child assault an unforgivable crime. He's asking for solitary confinement. Detective Davidson informed Joel. Claims other prisoners are threatening him. What did you tell him? That protective custody is earned, not guaranteed. He needs to demonstrate good faith cooperation with our investigation. Joel's smile carried no warmth. Stanley's desperation was exactly where Joel wanted him. Psychologically broken, socially isolated, and willing to do anything to minimize his suffering. Candy entered the courtroom with her high-priced attorney, a silver-haired shark named Oliver Lockwood, who specialized in defending wealthy defendants against embarrassing charges. She'd managed to make bail through her family's money, but the 3 days in custody had stripped away her veneer of suburban sophistication. Dark circles under her eyes, nervous fidgeting, constant glances toward the gallery where Joel sat with Miranda. Roberto Marks approached with final updates. Stanley's attorney is pushing hard for a plea bargain. Full confession, complete cooperation, testimony against Candy in exchange for minimum sentencing. The DA's considering it. And Candy's position? Still claiming innocence. Lockwood thinks he can convince a jury that Stanley acted alone, that Candy was as much a victim as Miranda. Joel studied his wife's profile as she conferred with her attorney. Candy still believed she could manipulate her way out of consequences, that her charm and social status would overcome evidence and testimony. She was about to learn otherwise. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the state has additional evidence that has come to light since the defendant's arrest. Joel watched as Garrett entered the courtroom carrying a sealed evidence box. Inside were recordings, photographs, and financial documents that would obliterate any remaining doubt about Candy's guilt. The prosecutor activated a digital display showing bank records. Mrs. Byers has been financially supporting Mr. Pearson for 6 months, paying his rent, utilities, and personal expenses totaling over $15,000. Additionally, cell phone records show 347 calls between the defendants during Lieutenant Commander Byers' deployment. Candy's face drained of color as each piece of evidence destroyed her claims of innocence. The financial support proved premeditation. The phone records demonstrated ongoing conspiracy. Together, they painted a picture of calculated betrayal rather than momentary weakness. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, we have surveillance footage from the defendant's neighborhood showing Mr. Pearson's vehicle at the Byers' residence on 17 separate occasions during the past month, always during business hours when Mrs. Byers should have been at work. Stanley's attorney raised his hand desperately. Your Honor, my client wishes to formally accept the state's plea offer and provide full testimony. Mr. Pearson, the judge asked, do you understand that you're waiving your right to trial and agreeing to testify against your co-defendant? Stanley's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. I want to tell the truth about what happened. Joel watched Candy's expression as her lover publicly betrayed her. Shock, rage, desperation, and finally a kind of broken recognition that her carefully constructed world was disintegrating. Stanley's testimony was comprehensive and devastating. He admitted to the affair, described their plan to wait out Joel's deployment, and provided explicit details about Miranda's assault. Most damaging, He revealed that Candy had suggested staging the fall to avoid investigation. She said we needed to make it look like an accident, Stanley testified. Said her husband would never question a simple fall, especially if he was stuck underwater during the investigation. Candy's attorney objected repeatedly, claiming Stanley's testimony was unreliable and self-serving, but the evidence supported every detail. Financial records, phone logs, surveillance footage, and Miranda's own testimony created an unbreakable chain of proof. When Miranda took the stand, her testimony was calm, precise, and utterly damning. She described the scene she'd witnessed, Stanley's violent response, and her certainty that the fall had been staged while she was unconscious. I remember my mother checking my pulse before calling 911, Miranda said quietly. She waited to make sure I was still alive before reporting the accident. The gallery erupted in whispers. Even Candy's own family members, who'd attended to support her, looked shocked by the implications. Candy hadn't just covered up the assault. She'd calculated whether her daughter would survive before deciding how to proceed. Joel felt a cold satisfaction as the jury absorbed this revelation. Candy had revealed herself as a woman capable of prioritizing her own interests over her daughter's life. No amount of legal maneuvering could overcome that fundamental betrayal of maternal instinct. During recess, Joel intercepted Candy outside the women's restroom. They faced each other in the empty hallway, husband and wife, now irreconcilable enemies. "This isn't over," Candy said quietly. "You think you've won, but I still have options." "What options?" Joel's voice carried the same clinical detachment he used during combat briefings. "Your lover has confessed. Your daughter has testified against you. Your finances are frozen. Your career is destroyed, and your reputation is permanently ruined. I could claim you've been abusive. Say this whole thing is revenge for a marriage that was already failing." Joel's smile was genuinely amused. "Try it. I have 15 years of military service records, clean psychological evaluations, and testimony from dozens of fellow officers about my character. You have a history of infidelity, financial irresponsibility, and now attempted murder of your own daughter." Candy's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the full scope of her situation. "Please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I never meant for Miranda to get hurt. You chose Stanley over Miranda the moment you let him into our house. You chose him again when you staged your accident. You've been choosing him over our family for months." Joel's voice never rose above conversational level. Now you get to live with those choices. As the trial resumed, Joel felt the satisfaction of a submarine commander whose torpedoes had found their target. Both Stanley and Candy would face maximum sentences, but more importantly, they would face social destruction that would follow them for the rest of their lives. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Stanley received 12 years for assault, conspiracy, and false reporting. Candy received 15 years for the same charges, plus additional time for child endangerment and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. But Joel's real victory wasn't the prison sentences. It was the knowledge that when Stanley and Candy eventually returned to society, they would find a world where everyone knew exactly what they had done to Miranda Byers and her family. Justice, Joel reflected, wasn't just about punishment. It was about ensuring that betrayal carried permanent consequences. Chapter 8. Scorched Earth. 6 months after the trial, Joel stood in the empty shell of what had been Candy's real estate office, watching workers remove the last traces of her former life. The building's new tenant, a cybersecurity firm owned by one of Garrett's associates, was renovating the space completely. Miranda waited in the car outside, no longer requiring constant supervision, but still preferring to stay close to her father during these final cleanup operations. Her physical recovery had been remarkable, but the psychological healing would take longer. Trust, once shattered, was rebuilt slowly and selectively. Joel's phone buzzed with an update from Roberto Marks. Pearson's parole hearing denied. Earliest possibility, now 2035. Candy's appeal rejected by state Supreme Court. Both defendants officially exhausted all legal options. Joel saved the message and forwarded copies to his intelligence network. Stanley and Candy's legal fates were sealed, but Joel's campaign had always extended beyond the courtroom. Prison had broken Stanley completely. Garrett's contacts inside the correctional system reported that Stanley spent most of his time in protective custody, had attempted suicide twice, and showed signs of severe psychological deterioration. He would likely serve his full sentence in isolation, emerging as a broken man incapable of rebuilding any meaningful life. Candy had proven more resilient, maintaining her innocence and attempting to organize other inmates behind claims of prosecutorial misconduct. But her efforts were undermined by the simple fact that everyone, guards, inmates, and staff, knew exactly what she'd done to her own daughter. Maternal betrayal was universally despised, even in prison. More importantly, Joel's external campaign had ensured that both defendants faced permanent social exile. Their names appeared on dozens of websites dedicated to documenting crimes against children. Their photographs and conviction details were preserved in databases that would be discovered by any future employer, landlord, or potential partner. Joel had also quietly contacted Candy's extended family, parents, siblings, cousins, providing them with complete documentation of her crimes. The family had responded by formally disowning her, removing her from wills and trusts, and making it clear that she would receive no support upon release. Stanley's situation was even worse. His sister Bernice, whose recorded conversation had provided crucial evidence, had changed her name and moved across the country to escape association with his crimes. His few remaining friends had publicly denounced him after news coverage revealed his pattern of targeting military wives. "Daddy," Miranda's voice came through Joel's earpiece. "Are you finished in there?" "Almost done, sweetheart." Joel took a final photograph of the empty office, then joined his daughter in the car. "How are you feeling?" "Good. Ready to move forward." Miranda's voice carried a strength that made Joel proud. His daughter had endured betrayal and violence, but she'd emerged with her integrity intact and her loyalty uncompromised. They drove through Virginia Beach toward their new house, a fortress-like structure in a gated community where Joel could ensure his daughter's absolute security. The old house had been sold within days to another Navy family, its association with scandal apparently having minimal impact on market value. Joel's own life had stabilized into a new pattern. He'd accepted promotion to full commander and a position at the Pentagon, allowing him to remain close to Miranda while advancing his career. His military reputation had actually been enhanced by the scandal. Colleagues respected his methodical response to family crisis and his refusal to let personal betrayal compromise his professional duties. More importantly, Joel's network had expanded significantly during the operation against Candy and Stanley. Military officers, law enforcement contacts, private security specialists, and intelligence analysts had all contributed to the campaign. These relationships would prove valuable for future challenges, and everyone involved understood that Joel Byers was a man who protected his allies and destroyed his enemies with equal efficiency. "There's something I want to show you," Joel said as they approached their new neighborhood. He handed Miranda a manila folder containing photographs and documents. Miranda opened the folder and found herself looking at surveillance photos of Stanley in prison, hollow-eyed, skeletal, obviously broken by his incarceration. Additional photos showed Candy during her recent parole hearing, where she'd been denied early release despite claims of good behavior and rehabilitation. "I want you to understand," Joel said quietly, "that the people who hurt you will never recover from the consequences of their choices. They'll never again be in a position to harm anyone's family." Miranda studied the photographs with the analytical intelligence she'd inherited from her father. They looked destroyed. Completely. Their lives, as they knew them, ended the day they decided to assault you. Everything since then has been just the slow realization of that fact. As they pulled into their new driveway, Miranda asked the question Joel had been expecting. "Do you think I'll ever be able to trust people again?" Joel considered his answer carefully. His daughter deserved honesty, not comforting platitudes. "You'll learn to trust selectively," he said finally. "You'll become very good at reading people's true character before allowing them close enough to hurt you." and you'll never again tolerate betrayal from anyone, no matter what relationship they claim with you. Like you. Exactly like me. Joel's smile carried genuine warmth for the first time in months. Some people call it being ruthless. I call it being realistic about human nature. They entered their new home together, father and daughter, survivors of a war that had taught them both the value of absolute loyalty and the cost of misplaced trust. Outside, Garrett's security team maintained discreet surveillance, ensuring that Joel's family would never again be vulnerable to attack from those they should have been able to trust. The submarine had finally found safe harbor, but its weapons remained armed and ready for anyone foolish enough to threaten what Joel Byers protected. Chapter 9. Surface Victory. 2 years later, Joel stood on the deck of the USS Normandy, his new command vessel, watching the sun set over the Pacific. His promotion to captain had come with assignment to one of the Navy's most advanced destroyers, recognition of his tactical brilliance and uncompromising leadership style. More importantly, it came with the knowledge that his reputation had been forged not just through military excellence, but through his methodical destruction of anyone who threatened his family. Miranda, now 18 and preparing for the Naval Academy, had grown into a formidable young woman who combined her father's analytical mind with a steely determination born from surviving betrayal. She'd chosen to follow Joel's path into military service, understanding that strength was the only reliable protection against a world filled with people willing to exploit trust for personal gain. Joel's secure phone buzzed with a message from Garrett. Final report enclosed. Both subjects confirmed neutralized permanently. The attached file contained updates Joel had been expecting. Stanley Pearson had died in prison 6 months ago, officially from complications related to chronic malnutrition and self-inflicted injuries, but more accurately from the psychological destruction Joel had orchestrated. Stanley had simply lost the will to continue existing. Candy's fate had been different, but equally final. Released after serving minimum sentence for good behavior, she discovered that Joel's social campaign had been even more effective than anticipated. Unable to find employment, housing, or social acceptance anywhere in the United States, she'd attempted to rebuild her life in Mexico. The attempt had failed catastrophically. Joel's international contacts, developed through years of military deployment, had ensured that Candy's criminal record and the details of her crimes followed her across borders. She died in a car accident outside Tijuana, driving drunk after losing her final appeal for asylum and protection. Joel felt no satisfaction from their deaths, only the cold completion of a tactical mission. Stanley and Candy had threatened his daughter, betrayed his trust, and demonstrated their willingness to prioritize their own desires over an innocent child's welfare. Their destruction had been inevitable from the moment they'd made those choices. Preston Nolan, now Joel's executive officer, approached with evening reports. Captain, all departments secured for the night. Any special orders? Maintain standard watch rotation. I'll be in my quarters reviewing tomorrow's training exercises. Joel's quarters aboard the Normandy were even more Spartan than his submarine cabin had been. A narrow bunk, a desk for charts and communications, and a single photograph. Miranda, in her academy uniform, smiling with the confident pride of someone who understood her own strength. Joel opened his laptop and reviewed intelligence reports from his growing network of contacts. Military officers whose wives had been targeted by predators like Stanley. Law enforcement officials who understood the importance of protecting military families. Private security specialists who shared Joel's philosophy about permanent solutions to recurring problems. Over the past 2 years, Joel had quietly assisted in 17 similar situations. Unfaithful spouses who'd endangered their children. Civilian criminals who'd targeted military families during deployments. Financial predators who'd exploited military wives' loneliness and isolation. In each case, Joel had provided tactical advice, resource connections, and strategic planning to ensure that threats were neutralized completely and permanently. His network had grown into an informal but highly effective organization dedicated to protecting military families from those who would exploit their service and sacrifice. None of these operations had required violence. Joel's reputation was now sufficient that most threats retreated when they learned of his involvement. Word had spread through military communities that Captain Joel Byers was a man who protected his allies with the same methodical precision he used to destroy his enemies. Joel's phone rang with a call from Miranda, now in her second year at Annapolis. "Hi, Dad. How's the Pacific treating you?" "Same as always. Vast, unpredictable, and full of hidden threats." "How are your studies?" "Challenging, but manageable. I'm particularly enjoying the tactical courses. Professor says I have an instinct for strategic thinking." Joel smiled at the pride in his daughter's voice. "That's genetic. Your grandfather was the same way during his Army service." "Dad, there's something I wanted to ask you." Miranda's tone became more serious. "Some of my classmates have been asking about what happened to Mom and Stanley. There's still news articles online, and people are curious. What do you tell them?" "The truth. That they chose to betray our family and assault me, and that they face the appropriate consequences for those choices." "How do people respond?" "Most are supportive. Military families understand that loyalty isn't negotiable. But a few seem to think you went too far, that everyone deserves second chances and forgiveness." Joel considered his response carefully. His daughter was old enough to understand the philosophical implications of his choices, mature enough to make her own decisions about mercy and justice. "Miranda, what do you think about second chances?" "I think second chances are earned through genuine repentance and changed behavior. I think some actions, like assaulting your lover's daughter to cover up adultery, demonstrate character flaws that can't be reformed." Miranda's voice carried the same clinical detachment Joel used during tactical assessments. "I think Mom and Stanley got exactly what they deserved. And the people who criticize that position, they've never been betrayed by someone they trusted completely. They don't understand that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt." Joel felt a deep satisfaction listening to his daughter's analysis. Miranda had inherited his strategic mind, but more importantly, she learned the crucial lesson that survival required the ability to identify and eliminate threats without sentiment or hesitation. "I'm proud of you," Joel said simply. "I learned from the best." After the call ended, Joel returned to his evening reports, but his mind remained focused on the larger picture. Miranda would graduate from the academy in 2 years, begin her own military career, and eventually face her own challenges with loyalty and betrayal. When that time came, she would be prepared. She would understand that mercy was a luxury reserved for those who had earned it, that trust was granted selectively and withdrawn permanently when abused, and that the only reliable protection against betrayal was the demonstrated capacity for overwhelming retaliation. Joel had spent 4 years transforming his personal tragedy into a comprehensive victory. Stanley and Candy were dead. Miranda was thriving. His own career had advanced beyond his highest expectations, and his network of allies had grown into a force capable of protecting military families throughout the Navy. Standing on the deck of his destroyer, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Captain Joel Byers understood that he had achieved something few men ever managed: absolute victory over those who had dared to threaten what he protected. The submarine had not only surfaced, but had become the flagship of a fleet dedicated to ensuring that betrayal carried swift, merciless, and permanent consequences. In the depths of the Pacific, Joel Byers had found his peace, not through forgiveness or reconciliation, but through the complete annihilation of his enemies and the absolute security of those he loved. Some wars ended with treaties and compromise. Others ended with total victory and the permanent silence of one's foes. Joel had chosen wisely. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.